Hi there, my name is Aaron Wilder, and I am an artist member of Amos Gallery, which is a nonprofit artist co-op in New York, in Manhattan's Lower East Side. And with me is James Horner, who's also a member of Amos Gallery, and his exhibition, his retrospective, Making of an American Dandy, opened January 8th and continues to February 7th. James, nice to be with you.
Great to be here, Aaron, and talking with you. And thanks for taking the time to interview me about my show.
Absolutely. So I was going to ask you, just starting out, if you could tell me a little bit about how you came about creating this retrospective.
Sure. So I started thinking about the last 40 years of my art making and thought it would be an interesting experience to look at my work from all those years and maybe get some ideas for the future. So in the retrospective, I've included work from most of my important eras, so to speak. In the 1980s during college, in my club days in New York City. So I have this etching in the show of the club area where artists like Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring used to create art and installations. And I used to go there a lot with my friends. It was a great club back then. And then in the 1990s, where I started living in Manhattan, I grew up in the suburbs, so I was very close to Manhattan. I'm meeting artists like photographer Victor Carnuccio, and I have a Polaroid of me by him in the show. And then the 2000s, when I started getting back into painting, in the 90s, I kind of took a hiatus from doing much painting after college. And I took classes at schools around the city. The first one I started at was Parsons School of Design, and I was inspired there by my teacher, Elizabeth Condon. She was making doll paintings, and so I created some doll paintings and toy paintings. This painting here is called A Dawn Doll's Life. And included in this is a Dawn doll from the 70s. There are these little sized dolls, and a Mickey Mouse toy, Captain America, and a small orange figure from one of my favorite TV shows, Space 1999. And he's just sitting there on her shoulder. And then in the 2010s, during my MFA years at Lehman College, I was looking at the grotesque figure. So I have a large painting in the show of a runway from a fashion show with a lot of interesting characters watching the models. And then the last few years, I had a boyfriend, Chris Hamilton, who committed suicide. And so now focusing on LGBTQ plus folks, their icons, and Marsha P. Johnson. So right here is a gouache painting of me and Chris sleeping. He liked to take pictures of us while we were asleep. Of course, he was awake. And my latest painting of the American flag and a beefcake with the words from the Pledge of Allegiance in glitter glue, impressing our need for liberty and justice for all.
And how did you come about creating the title, Making of an American Dandy?
So I felt it made sense when I started looking at all the work together. I also included an installation called Wall of Decades with photos, art show invites, and letters, and more kinds of memorabilia that traces most of my life from being a child to where I am now. And looking at it all in one place, I immediately thought of the term dandy. From growing up with artistic, eccentric parents to my life in New York City, friends, family, travel, theater. And now at 60, the term just seemed to fit.
And so, coming now to more recent work, can you tell me a little bit about how you're focused on queer folks and their icons?
Yeah, so I survived the AIDS crisis back in the 1980s and 90s. And during that time, I saw many of my friends pass away. And ACT UP was beginning to protest in places like Grand Central. So in the last few years, I started looking at artists from this time period, like Hugh Steers, David Wojnarowicz, at the Leslie Loman Museum of Art, where I'd done some exhibits. Then I just started doing this type of work and realized it was just a good spot for me.
And so, what are you now experimenting with in your work?
So, in recent paintings and etchings, I've been including found objects like leather metal belts and leather gloves. In my retrospective, this painting, Homebody, is a view from the back of a man with a belt wrapped around it. And my etching, Monster Mash Guernica, has a frame made out of aluminum and leather metal belts sewn in the corners with waxed thread. So I kind of like these objects as they have, it's kind of like an idea of binding and masculinity.
Yeah, and the you've also curated an exhibition in Amos Gallery's project space with your Magenta Lounge group. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So in early 2025, I wanted to bring together a group of queer artists so that I could kind of, involve myself more in the queer community and do some curating. So I started with a public art show in the windows of an abandoned building in Chicago. We had about five or six LGBTQ plus artists. And so when I knew I was going to have an exhibit at the Amos Gallery, I thought it'd be great to have this Magenta Lounge group do a show also. So there are some of the original artists from the original group, and then I invited some other artists. For example, you, Aaron, you're in the show. And so the exhibit is called Queer Today, Love, Power, Freedom. And it kind of looks at um, different age groups from different parts of the country and different um, um, facets of queer people, from lesbians, transgenders, gay, and it kind of looks at what's going on in society today, like a snapshot.
Yeah, and I so appreciate you including my work in the show, so thanks for that.
Sure.
And I want to thank you for telling me a little bit about your exhibition, its background, and your art making practice. I want to remind everyone that the exhibition is on view through February 7th and in person, and then also on artsy.net. Thanks,
Great.
James.
Thanks. Thanks, Aaron.